Hello, my name is Gabriel and from the Concierge OS series. Last time we left off after we have populated our database with guest names, rooms, and reservations. As we can see them here, after making a select in database, we have reservations. And the plan was to create two scripts. One script should move all the reservations 1 day forward, so should shift the check-in and check-out date forward in order to update them all. And the second script should implement the synchronization errors so that we can treat them differently afterwards. The first script would be so considering the existing reservations from the SQLite database, shift them 1 day forward for both check-in date and check-out date. As usual, we'll start with the plan phase. The solution proposed is the correct one. Indeed, an SQL update is the easiest route. However, we would like to have a script because this script we will integrate it in an API endpoint that we will call every time we need it. Perfect. The optional argument could be useful in the future. Probably we can leave it as it is. Now we switch to act mode and it will create a script. Now it's trying to run the script to make sure it works. And indeed, it worked. Now that we shift all the reservations 1 day forward, they will always be updated for today. And now we need the second script. This one will be slightly more complicated. There are two ways of creating this script. We either extract from the database the reservation IDs that we want to play with and we store them in a list, or we also create a logic that identifies which ones of those reservations are the ones to be eligible for turning them into an erroneous status. What we try to achieve is to have a discrepancy between the check-in, check-out interval and the status. We need some of the reservations to have a wrong date and others to have a wrong status. Probably the solution or the better solution would be to use some specific room IDs, because like this in the future we will know which ones are always available for testing, and later we can split them in sections, and for each test type we can use a different section. Based on the data available in the reservation table, identify the reservations which have named collisions for guests. Yesterday, for some of the reservations, we made sure that we have the same guest names in multiple places. We want to use these today because in the case of a missynchronization, we either receive just the status or just the state, or we either receive a new reservation altogether with new data, and in that moment we will have two reservations in the system. An older one that was received beforehand that was wrong, and a new one with the fix from the platform. We don't really know how our integrators are gonna handle these situations, so we are best to be prepared. That's why we want to use these with naming conflict. And then yesterday we have created 5 naming conflicts. We want 2 of them to have an erroneous state and 2 of them to have the check-in, check-out in a wrong state. Then we want to have them exposed in the console. This would make our life a lot easier. And we want to also have a list of reservations IDs which are filtered out by default, because later when we will add more tests, we want to have a little bit of control. We want to make sure that no other tests will be altered by this test, which set up errors for us. Let's pay attention to the proposal. So it wants to pick up 4 collision reservations, excluding the filter risk. This is correct. 2 reservations will go into an erroneous status, for example, from check-in to cancel or checked out. This is a good point. Probably we'll need both in the future. Let's see. And the reservation we checked in today and checked out in the future should be switched from confirm to check-in. No, this one should be checked out. The reason why we want to change this one is because if we let it to check in, it can also be considered that the client has actually arrived and has checked in ahead of time, and this will not produce an error. It will produce maybe an exception or a treated special case, but not an error. Perfect. The next step that we should do after this script is finished and is working, we should ask it to move the shift reservation script in the generator folder, and then we should ask it to go over the scripts, the Python scripts from the generator folder, and apply the dry principle. Do not repeat yourself, because in all the scripts it's initiating a connection to the database, which is exterior. And if we are to make a change or an update to database and we migrate away from SQLite, it will be very tedious to update all of them. After this refactoring, I also expected to create in the generator folder the init dunder file that marks the generator as a Python package. I will also update after refactoring. I will also ask it to update the README file with the two new scripts that have been added and how they should be handled. Another step here, if we look around, we can see that the statuses and everything are duplicated. It is a good idea to refactor as soon as possible and migrate from having the queries as strings, to migrate into using an ORM. Like this, we will have classes with the representation of the tables, and we will have a better control over the models. This will eliminate some of the hallucinations and will make the code way more reusable than it is now. Good, it produces something. I don't know if it would work or not. It is yet to be seen. I think first we'll try to fix the syntax errors. Perfect. The task has been complete. There is no point in trying to validate now that these IDs actually represent the errors that we want, because it is fairly tedious for a human to check them like this in the database. Later in the series, we will create a debug page where we will pull this information, and even without that debug page, in the moment when we retrieve the information about reservations and we display them on the page that the hotel employee sees, these reservations will appear as errors. So for sure, we will get to test them manually later on for free. So now we will ask it to move shift reservations and apply dry. When we ask for refactoring, it is a good idea to start with the plan phase, because it can happen that as it goes over files and we stack up context, at some point it will start losing that context. And it is important for the LLM, when refactoring things, to keep a list of actionable items and a list of the reasoning that led him to these decisions. Like so, later, if anything happens, we can feed the same list and ask it to resume work. Judging by the output, it seems to be what we want. All the paths will be exterior to each of the scripts. That will make it super easy to migrate to a different database in the future, to a more powerful one if we need so. And then there will be a new utils script which initiates the connection. This is very, very useful, because later, after the migration, we can change only this method. So as you can see, although the model that we are using right now is a local one and it is not the smartest in the room, as long as we guide it through all the steps and we make sure to clean up afterwards, it is perfectly usable. For shift reservations, I would have preferred the copy-paste. This kind of differences in approaches between what a human would do and what the LLM does will be fixed later when we will learn how to specify how the agent should operate. We can create a list of instructions that should be followed, and there we will also add this. In order to copy the content from one file to the other, the LLM can lose context along the way and hallucinate new lines of code in the new files. it is much safer to just use copy-paste command and then fix the errors if there are any. Here we have our utils script with the connection, and then this script is called in all the other files. Now, the last bit of work for today is to update the README file with the latest changes and instructions on how to run the new scripts. Then, for the next episode, we will create a very basic front-end web page where we can see the output of our database to make sure that we have the reservations and we have them grouped by check-ins, check-outs, buckets, and maybe display them visually based on the layout of the hotel. This will help us make sure that we have sufficient data. Then, in 2 episodes, we will create the functionality that has to exist in order for the LLM to interact with the database by its own in a safe way. Because if now we would give access to an LLM to the database, the LLM can consider that an easier way to fix some problems is to clean the database, which is super wrong. So we want to create some tools that the LLM can use, which are safe enough in context that it cannot do damage. And then with this, after these tools are created, we want to deploy different LLMs and measure if they are a good fit for 8 users. They have to be fast enough, they have to provide a good answer. So all the data in the database in a format that we can reuse. If we ask it for the data to be in a specific format, it has to be in that format. This will allow us to benchmark different models that exist on Hugging Face and choose the one that it is the best for our use case. Let's review a little bit what has been done before finishing this episode. Have the new scripts correct? Boilerplate, room guests and reservations. Yes, this is correct. Then we generate names, correct. Then we generate rooms and we populate rooms, correct. Then we populate guests and reservations, correct. Then we can shift reservations by 1 day or more days back and forth. This is also correct. Then we inject controlled errors for testing with the new script. It selects 2 reservations and puts them to checkout. For the check-in reservation, it moves the checkout in the past, so there is discrepancy. And for the checkout reservation, it moves the check-in date in the future, so the checkout is outside of the interval, which is correct. Paths, names, and initiate connection. Okay, this is correct. I am not so worried about these errors because they will be fixed automatically as soon as we migrate to models and an ORM. They are just syntax errors saying that this specific type is unknown. It is not a problem. Good. Thank you very much for listening and see you in the next episode.